Hello there, and a huge welcome to this week's episode of Gina Gardner and Friends. And today I have a returner. I have John Latta with me, who is a mystic, the author of Synchronicity of Love, and a teacher. And we had such a great conversation, and we were by no means finished with the conversation last time, that I've invited John to come back. And today our theme is about open hearts and open minds. Now, it's a saying, John, thank you and welcome for joining me. It's a saying that that's very close to your heart. Why is that saying so? Why does it have such significance for you?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks again for the invitation to be back with you again. It's really fun to join you again on your show. Well, I think probably it's important to me because that's been my journey. And I'm going to go back over 20 years ago. Michael Crichton wrote a book called Travels. Michael Crichton, the author, who's written dozens of best-selling novels, but he wrote a nonfiction book called Travels. And he also went through a period where he was highly intelligent and thought he knew it all, and went through kind of his own version of, you might call it, a midlife crisis at quite a young age 30. And when he came out of it, he was determined to go and experience for himself directly everything he'd ever just read about. He wanted to determine for himself what he thought about it. And he chose to open his book and all of his stories with a quote from Rilke that goes, "Some evening, take a step out of your house, which you know so well. Enormous space is near." And I love that quote, even though at the time I didn't really make any sense to me. And it's only after a couple of decades looking back that I look back with such reverence at that quote, because that's been my journey. And so I would call it sometimes grudgingly, sometimes fighting, but constantly trying to open my mind, open my heart to see things differently, to experience it for myself, not just go by the opinions of others or what I read online or in a book or something. I wanted to go experience it directly for myself. And it made all the difference in the world. And I encourage everybody to do that. Now, some people do that naturally by nature. A lot of people are kind of more locked into their belief systems and their routines. But, if you get locked in for too long, sometimes life can feel sort of empty, stale, dry. And so I encourage everybody, when they kind of lived out their belief systems and kind of wore them out, it's time to sort of be like the caterpillar and the butterfly and go through the transformation and be somebody different and appreciate life, see life differently. And life will feel immeasurably richer as a result of it. And I, like so many people, do that, but usually only after a lot of pain and suffering. And so I think my message is now, it doesn't always have to be pain and suffering that drags you into a, kicking and screaming into a deep transformation. I think if you just take it day by day, week by week, it's like, I'm willing to open my mind here a little bit, open my heart to this situation and to see things differently. And I think it's a way of living that I would encourage everybody, even though it can be scary, because boy, all of us to one degree or another are kind of wedded to our routine, wedded to our belief systems, wedded to how we think we see things. And we have a lot invested in that. I had a therapist friend that was cracking me up. She said, John, I can't tell you how many people, they come into my office and I point and I say, the grass really is greener over there. All you have to do is cross the bridge, but they're afraid. And the known is preferable, even though it's terrible, to the unknown, which probably is going to be better. And so I just guess I want to always encourage people to just be a little brave, cross that bridge to the other side, see what it looks like over there, and decide for yourself if it was worth crossing the bridge to the other side and seeing things differently.
There's so much in there. The old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, is one that always strikes me as such an important one to take on board. And you're right, so many people will stay within the known, their comfort zone, even though it's anything but comfortable, because it gives the illusion of being safe, because it is the known. And yet, we don't know what we don't know. So if you always work within that cycle or that circle of known territory, you're never going to grow and expand.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that you use the analogy of a caterpillar and a butterfly. It's one I use a lot myself. So if you think about the world as the caterpillar sees it, it crawls along the branch, munching away, getting fatter and fatter. But it sees things from a very different perspective. It's very earthbound, isn't it?
Yeah.
So its perspective is necessarily smaller. When it mogrifies it, it becomes the butterfly. It's a completely different organism. And it sees things from a height. It has the opportunity to fly and be free. But I think the thing that I find so interesting is that if you look at the bit in the middle, there's the pupa. And if you were cruel enough to cut the pupa in the middle, it's just mush.
Yeah.
So the caterpillar has to sort of become something that is unformed in order to form the new version, which is the butterfly.
Yeah.
And I think so many people are frightened of the void in the middle.
Yeah.
If I stay where I am as a caterpillar, well, at least I know where the next leaf is. It might be a thorny branch, or it might be that, you know, my view is boring, but I haven't got to go through that void.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And in fact, I can honestly say, looking back over the last 20 years, that was the scariest part, was the unknown, because the mind is so quick to fill in the gaps of what it's probably going to be like. But the truth is, it doesn't know what it's going to be like. I mean, the caterpillar doesn't come out of the cocoon a bigger, fatter caterpillar. It comes out completely different, you know? And so, yeah, and I think it's kind of hysterical looking back at all the fear I felt through my journey, because I had a lot of very interesting, unexpected experiences, you know, with energy, Kundalini energy, visions, energy coursing through my body, you know, that was healing me and other people, but felt entirely out of my volitional control. And so looking back, it was beautiful. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have been doing it in total trust. But I didn't know, because of just the way you described, there's so much uncertainty. There's the unknown. And there are sometimes great periods of waiting where it doesn't feel like you're either a caterpillar or a butterfly. And so if you're kind of action oriented like I am, those are some of the worst parts of all, is the waiting parts.
We're talking about being brave enough to move into the unknown, to recognize that nobody knows it all. And, you know, I don't think we've ever lived in a time in history when there has been so much knowledge available and such a breadth of knowledge. No one person can know it all. And one of the things that strikes me is when people are fearful, and I think we live at a time when many people are living in fear and don't have the faith that things will be okay,
Yeah.
that they then clasp on to what they think they know, like somebody holding on to a piece of flotsam in the ocean having just been shipwrecked. What's your view? Excuse me.
Well, I totally agree. And I would even add on to that. If things get scary enough in the collective, a huge portion of the population will, I'm going to call it, try and find their tribe too, because they feel safe, you know, as a Republican or a Democrat or a Jewish person or a Christian person or a, you know, a football team fan, or, you know. And so, yeah, I think there's this always, when things get scary, individually or collectively, there's this desire to hang on to the known and to hang out with your tribe, and the tribe that you know will help you feel safe, because everything out there feels like it's opposed to you some way. And it takes great courage to embrace the uncertainty. And in my experience, I mean, all experiences are just, they're just here. We can learn from them. We grow from them. We evolve from them. And if you believe that we have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, there really are people on the planet who are young souls, middle-aged souls, old souls. And, and one of the ways we become an old soul is to go through a lot of experiences. And life as a human being on earth, we have an almost infinite variety of experiences that we can experience. And I think that's one thing that's helpful. If you can treat everything that you're going through, no matter how difficult it is, as a lesson. What am I learning from this? How can I learn from this? Because at its core, none of us are a human being. None of us are at its core, but we are embodied as humans. We are having a human experience. And it's an easy thing to say. It's a hard thing to do when you're in fear and anxiety. But if you just keep coming back to that, I'm having this experience and I'm learning from it. It might be painful. I think it can soften the blow and not make people so likely to hang on to the known and to retreat to the safety of their tribe, their family or their culture.
I think we are so conditioned, aren't we? We tend to, I did some research about who are the people you are likely to like and befriend, and it's people who we perceive to be like us.
Yeah.
And everybody uses a different criteria or a set of criteria as a blueprint, if you like, in terms of people and situations that we consider safe, and people and situations that we consider different. And different for most people at deep level, they feel unsafe. And it takes us right back to cavemen and women, who, if you weren't part of the same tribe, then you were a threat. And that if there was a change in the weather or a change in the circumstances, that was a threat. And I've spoken about this many times on the show, that we like to think that we have hugely evolved. But the reality is that deep in our core, we are not greatly different to our ancestors. And it just strikes me that so many people believe that they want a life that is without challenge. If only life was easy. But I don't know about you, my greatest learning has come from my challenges.
Yeah.
You talk about lessons, I talk about lessons and gifts, and there've been huge gifts in those challenges, because when life is very even, we don't learn very much. And to be quite honest, most of the time, if it was like that all the time, it would be incredibly boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, Gina. I have to concede all my greatest growth gifts, all the words you use, came with my biggest challenges. There's no doubt about it. And so when I encounter another big challenge, I try to remind myself, okay, I've been through big challenges before. I can get through this, but sometimes I forget. And I also want to tag on to what you're saying, and this is just how I perceive things. I think in the collective, I'm going to talk about humanity as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that want things to be safe and predictable, and to use your words, boring. But if the pendulum gets tilted too far that way, then a certain portion of the population wants to stir things up. I'm going to call it chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But when the pendulum goes too far into chaos, here come all the people wanting to control things again, wanting to return to, I almost call it traditional family values, traditional values, to the known, the safe, the boring, the predictable, the controlled. And that's kind of how I see life. And it's actually kind of how I see politics in a lot of ways too. Too much chaos, and somebody is going to come along that's going to try and control or minimize the chaos. Too much boredom, somebody's going to come along and stir things up again. And I kind of think that's how life is, and I kind of think that that's how people are wired too. Like, they want safety, they want predictability, but if it goes on year after year, it can get kind of tiresome. But too much calamity and chaos, and they want everything put in order again. And so that's just one of the ways I see it, is this pendulum swinging back and forth and back and forth.
And I think for getting the balance, that's the thing, isn't it? When you are in that perfect balance, that there is enough uncertainty or variety to keep you stimulated and for things to be feeling that you are not in a rut, but at the same time, we've all got that level of security, of control that we need in order to feel safe, and it's going to be different for different people. But I think it's quite fascinating watching it over my lifetime in terms of roles of leadership, how the world is changing and how the speed at which things are made available to people in terms of information through communication has significantly changed. And so people had the opportunity before, when things came by pigeon post and snail mail, and you had that telephone with a wire to the wall, and information took time to get across from different countries. Now, as things are happening, it is news on social media and so on. I think part of it is that people don't get a chance to actually manage one bit of information or one challenge before another is thrown at them. And so that's constantly putting people off balance. And so I think part of this is people being able to be grounded and recognize where their own anchor point is. And be able to use the off switch for media and social media and say, actually, I don't need to know that. I can't do anything about it. I will deal with what I have within my immediate environment for this moment in time. I'm not talking for forever, but at this point, I'll deal with my stuff and then I'll look out to other people's stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And I experience exactly what you're talking about. And I think even when it comes to learning, you have to, I heard an author describe it as you have to ingest something, digest something, and then metabolize it, like embody it. Yeah. And I think when there's such a glut of information and things out there, I think it's all at the level of barely being ingested, but it's not being digested, and it's not being embodied. And I think that's that grounding piece you're talking. Yeah. And so I find myself living in the world today, the best word I have in my vocabulary is no. No. I mean, because God, there's endless distractions. Even just the news alone, I mean, is changing by the minute and changing by the hour. And so I try to sort of skim the news, maybe skim social media, but then focus on one thing and try to tune everything out, because between social media, the internet, the news, the media, cell phones, if you remember in the old days, the phone had a wire on it, but you actually had to be there to answer the phone. You could have been out in your car, and it's like, well, missed that call. Yeah. And so it's extraordinary the amount of, I'm going to call it, noise that's out there now. And so I like to pick and choose, one thing at a time or a few things at a time, and try to really slow down and kind of embody it before I move on to the next thing.
I think that's great advice. We've just before the break, John was talking about the white noise, I call it, that is around, and the need to say no. And I would add to that all electronic equipment, all technical equipment has an off button. And I get the sense that, at the moment, technology is often, the tail wagging the dog rather than the dog wagging the tail. And how important it is to be quite discerning about how you spend your time, because you can only spend your time and your energy once. And if you're spending hours on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, what value are you getting out of it other than it allowing you to pass time quite pleasurably? And that's fine for a while. But if that's going to be, you're spending hours and hours on it, you have to ask yourself, is that the best use of your time and your energy?
Yeah. So my book, The Synchronicity of Love, and it's 119 short stories in it, probably half the stories in it came to me through dreams and meditations. And I would never have gotten that cruising the internet, channel surfing on TV, spending a lot of time on my cell phone and text messaging. And so, yeah, in addition, that's what I want to say. The most valuable word to me in the English language today is no. And it's like, no. I'm going to be in the integrity of my own space for about an hour now. And I'm going to listen to myself, because I really, if I could summarize my book, it would be, that there is guidance of a higher nature available to myself and to other people that I didn't know was available. But it does require quiet time. It requires a good night's sleep. It requires asking for dreams at night. It requires awareness and meditation. I would meditate 10 times, and 9 out of 10 times it'd be a quiet, peaceful experience. But the 10th time, some being shows up and is speaking to me and giving me great wisdom and great insight into things. I can't get that from somebody else's social media posts.
No.
I can get that I should do that myself, but until I actually do it. And so, yeah, and I think I'm kind of just wired anyway to enjoy and try to be in the integrity of my own space for a period of time every day.
I think there are many people who really struggle with that.
Yeah.
That they, and I, having been in the world of education, I think it was a growing problem whilst I was a serving principal head teacher. I think it's a much bigger issue. And that is the capacity for children to be able to entertain themselves, or to do something that does not require somebody else to make it incredibly entertaining. And that's not to say that teachers or parents go out of their way to make life boring, not at all. But at the same time, I think so many children, if doesn't come and look like a video game that's very noisy and lots of moving parts, they're not interested. And I think that's going to be quite an issue, because there's a lot of stuff that we learn by reading or being quiet. And there's such a wealth of opportunity in terms of opening a great book. But
it's kind of cracks me up, like with the advent of the internet, which just, God, has changed so many things in life. On the one hand, I feel like it's how everything is in the world. On the one hand, it's better. You've got this access to information that the general public worldwide never had access to. And if it did, it was really slow or highly filtered. And it's amazing, but it's also a curse because I want to say there's so much content out there, and learning to just pick and choose and not get sucked into it, because it can be an addiction just like anything else, like gambling or sex or anything else. It can be an addiction that can just eat up hours and hours of your day. And so, yeah, learning this, and I'm not saying people shouldn't get on there and shouldn't learn that way, but coming back to what we talked about earlier about balance, learning to spend time alone, learning to be receptive to kind of your own inner wisdom. That's a skill that I want to encourage everybody to try to embrace.
And becoming discerning about what to watch and what not. Having said that, I'd love people to go and sign up to my YouTube account. There's lots of real value there. It's genuinely You with Gina Gardner. And there are some silly YouTube shorts, but there's also some real wisdom there that's been garnered over decades. And that's all available free on YouTube. Before we finish the show, we've only got the last few minutes, where can people find you and your book?
Yeah, so my name is John David Latta, and the last name is spelled Latta, and my website is johndavidlatta.com. You can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I found out just recently Target and Walmart as well.
Wow,
it's called The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. 119 true and mostly true stories, very short stories, good for today's generation that has short attention spans.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The one thing for me that's so important is that we add value. So please do contact me at Gina Gardner and Friends, and the word "and" is the word "and," not the ampersand, and let me know, what do you think? What do you enjoy? And what would you like more of? And if you've got a story to share, then I'd love to know that. Think about open hearts, open minds. How open are you? How much are you allowing yourself to grow and to do things in a different way? This year, I think, is going to be a real challenge for so many people. But ultimately, you decide whether that challenge defines you or whether you look for the lesson and the gift in that challenge, and you use it to help you grow. Thanks very much for joining me. Thanks, John. Bye-bye now.